Hi, Rob Sinnott here. I'm here to talk a little bit about philosophy with some of the greatest chiropractors in Latin America and South America. I'm looking forward to our time together. You've got a great lineup for your event. It's quite exciting. And what I'm going to talk about specifically is a little bit about some of the myths that we all hear in chiropractic. Um, a lot of myths out there. We could spend hours and hours and hours discussing things that we all know aren't quite correct in the way the public's perception is. But what's more important is the way we think as chiropractors, because if we are carrying around some of these myths that we've been told that we just didn't know weren't real, it holds us back from learning more, and that's a problem because the whole purpose of what we do in chiropractic is to benefit those people we're fortunate enough to take care of. And to best do that, we have to have a full understanding of what chiropractic is. And of course, that begins and ends with our philosophy. So I'm going to share my screen here to just a small number of these issues, because there are, like I said, far too many to even get into. But what we'll do is we'll talk about 7 of the bigger ones and 7 of the more important ones. Again, you can certainly spend your entire Congress this week talking about these myths, but we really need to get to the most important ones that are holding you back to be a better chiropractor, because isn't that what it's all about? And as I said, again, this is Rob Sinnott. I'm a chiropractor. I've been practicing for 31 years in Illinois, south of Chicago. And I spent my first 20 years in practice really digging in and learning all I could about our chiropractic philosophy, which led me to write my first book, Sinnott's Textbook of Chiropractic Philosophy, in 2009. And since that time, I've been devoting a lot of my time to the science of what we do. And we're going to be getting into both of those and how they fit together, because one really leads you to understand all of these portions of chiropractic that we think about. So my email is on the screen. I've been stalling a little bit in case you wanted to jot that down. If you need to get a hold of me, that's probably the best way to do it. And also through Facebook, if you're on Facebook. If you friend me through Facebook, just send me a message and put in Brazil or Congress or something like that in the message, so I know where you're coming from, and I will automatically get you straight in there, because we have a lot to talk about in our profession, and I really try to find every avenue I can to do that. So, talking about some of these myths. We hear often that, D.D. Palmer and B.J. Palmer, that they came up with our chiropractic philosophy as some sort of a legal defense, because they had gotten into issues with medical doctors in court saying that we were practicing medicine, and we used philosophy to differentiate us. Now, while it's true that our philosophy does differentiate us from medical doctors, that's absolutely not true, because when we look at the history of our profession, how did our philosophy originate? Well, it really originated from before D.D. Palmer ever gave that first chiropractic adjustment to Harvey Lillard. So did D.D. really have no philosophy at all? Of course not. As a matter of fact, D.D. had his first 5 principles of D.D.'s principles. These aren't necessarily the 33 principles or part of that necessarily, but his first 5 principles had already been written down and delineated and identified, that really led to the concept that Harvey Lillard may find some sort of change in his physical condition with his hearing from a subluxation in the spine and an adjustment, which didn't have those terms subluxation and adjustment yet. But when D.D. Palmer gave that first adjustment, there was nothing accidental about it at all. It was very specific. So we hear a lot of people, this minority that likes to promote that, oh, well, that philosophy, that was good for its time. It was just there to protect us from the courts and all that stuff. And that's really so far off base, it's not even true. But you have to think about what their agenda is. The people that are pushing a lot of these myths we're going to talk about today, their agenda is to push us more and more towards medicine and kind of meld us or melt us into the medical profession. And we'll lose our separate and distinct identity as chiropractors, and we'll lose what we do, because medicine isn't going to come to what we do. So, that is going to have to go out the door, and we can't have that, because that makes us nothing special for the healthcare community. And also, who profits? What would be not only their reasoning for it, but where is the money in this? When you look at trying to change medicine, which there's a very vocal group who's really working very hard to change medicine, to stop focusing so much on sickness and disease and start focusing more on restoring health and the concepts of health. And there's a lot of directions you can go with this, as we'll talk about here. So truth is always important, and when it comes right down to it, when people won't accept the truth, you have to wonder why. And there's an old quote that refers to, when people come to love money more than the truth, they'll get to where they won't accept the truth anymore, because they won't give up that profit, that idea of where they really feel their benefit is for them personally. They won't give that up. So another one we hear a lot is that universal intelligence is the same thing as God, or it's a deity. In that sense. And if we look at the major premise, that everything in our philosophy originates here in that sense, where we talk about a universal intelligence being in all matter, all types of matter, living matter that's adapting, living things, flowers, humans, all of those things. And also inanimate objects, rocks and stop signs, and anything along that route. There's an intelligent action that organizes those atoms and organizes everything to maintain it in that sense of existence. That's a really big, broad picture that they've painted, but you can really bring all 33 principles down from this. If you put a little effort into it, you'll see where that comes. We're not getting into that today so much as we will into discussing why this equation of universal intelligence in God does a disservice not only to our chiropractic philosophy, but to religion as well. If you're doing a disservice to your religious beliefs by equating the two, you're hurting everything that is true to you, whether it's your chiropractic beliefs or your religious beliefs. You're damaging both of them, and we'll talk about why. So, when our originators of our philosophy, when the Palmers looked around them and they saw all the order in the universe, and that can go 100 different directions. But even in very small things like food webs, where you look at chains of where one animal eats this plant, and this plant helps them survive, and then that animal is necessary for another animal to survive, and so on and so forth, through that whole food web is what they're called. Everything is in perfect, somewhat perfect order anyway. It's not chaotic, it's not accidental. And so when they decided that, we really can't find an example of chaos existing in that same sense, in the matter that surrounded them through the perceptions that they have. And we have to remember, we're dealing with sight, taste, smell, touch. I mean, we really don't have, hearing. We really don't have the perception to see around a corner. We have limitations of what we're able to understand, and those are the tools we have at our disposal to do so. So if there's order in everything they encountered, they reasoned that there must be that level of organization, and everything has to have some sort of an intelligent, overarching view behind it, that there's something, somehow it's all being organized. And so in our own profession, we just determined that the term universal intelligence would be used just so we can have a good, frank, honest discussion amongst ourselves. And that's where the word comes from. So, is it really a deity, a god, or some other sort of a religious entity? Can atheists agree with this premise? Absolutely. There is nothing in our philosophy that whether someone is an atheist or a theist, that they would find any discordance with. The idea of a first cause, that something, some primordial cause of everything that began this. Even at that level, the chair, the Alford Chair of Moral and Religious Philosophy at Harvard University, who has written probably the most important work of this nature, it discusses in great detail that, you know, on the ideas of a first cause, of an idea of omnipotence, that no one is going to disagree with that, no matter what your religious beliefs are. They're beyond religion. They're not part of that. It's not until we get to other portions, which we're going to discuss in a minute, that you fall into religion. So we say in our philosophy that it's you know, we have physical laws that rule. You know, the things are limited by physical laws. You know, the intelligence of our body can't break a physical law. Physical laws don't fit in with a religious concept. They're beyond that. There's no breakdown at that point for a deity or a god in that sense. So here's where we really get into a problem. When we start to look at morality, moral law, you know, as we say, thou shalt nots, like in the 10 Commandments, thou shalt not steal, thou shalt not commit adultery, thou shalt not, you know, murder, or whatever. Those types of things have no place in our philosophy. That doesn't mean our philosophy is against those things. What it means is they're just not part of our discussion. We don't have moral law. You know, what we discuss in our profession is all about the physical laws that are running things. Whether or not you're a good moral person and you help a little old lady across the street so she doesn't get hit by a bus, you would think from a religious context that you would be thought of in a better way by a deity, by that. So in that same sense, if you're equating that with universal intelligence, you are saying that universal intelligence would treat you differently, or have a difference of opinion about how you would be compared to someone who pushes that same little old lady in front of a bus and causes her to be killed. But you know, universal intelligence, that's not part of this. We don't have that morality or that holiness. Those types of things aren't brought into our discussions in chiropractic philosophy. So when we look at our any questions you have about our philosophy, always look to the principles, the 33 principles, and spend some time with the wording and spend some time with the reason things are termed the way they are. It's very specific language, and it's very important that we not subvert that and change things because it changes the meaning. So if we take that, I refer to it as a yardstick. We take that way of measuring. You know, this is what a meter is, and so we know, you know, we know how many centimeters there are in a meter. That's obvious. No matter where you measure it, it's going to be the same. You can measure it underwater, on the land, on the moon. It's the same thing. So the same thing with our philosophy. If we use this to measure the decisions we make in the concepts as we develop them for ourselves, you're going to develop them much better, but you have to spend a lot of time with these. So if we look at just a couple of them, we'll look at 18, 26, and 11, or I'm sorry, 8, 26, and 11. So 8 says the purpose of intelligence is to create force. So what is the purpose of universal intelligence? Is the purpose of universal intelligence to create force? Well, absolutely it is. Is the purpose of God to create force? Well, no, that doesn't fit. You know, that's very limiting. That's not in the concept of what a deity is capable of. Principle 26 talks about universal intelligence, how it tends to be destructive regarding structural matter. Now, the idea that God has this destructive tendency towards structural matter, you could make that argument in some small way, but it's not quite the same. Because if you look at principle 11, it says the forces of universal intelligence are manifested by physical laws. We talked already about how the physical laws are limiting, and they're not limiting in the sense of what a God would have to say. And principle 11 continues to say that they have no solicitude for the structures in which they work. So those two people we talked about before, the one that helps the little old woman across the street so she doesn't get hit by a bus, or the person that pushes her in front of a bus, there's no solicitude. It doesn't make a difference. There's no difference in the way a universal intelligence acts upon these individuals. It's exactly the same. So what would be the point of a religion where the deity, you don't have to behave a certain way? There's no moral code. There's no expectation of you to be a better person. There's none of these things involved. That would be a pretty lousy religion. So when you equate universal intelligence with God, you're damaging not only our philosophy, which is obvious, but you're also damaging your religious beliefs. And you're saying you don't understand your religious beliefs as well either. And it's pretty damaging. We hear a lot of speakers make these equations, and it's just not right. We really have to be able to make the argument of why that's not right. And, because every time a speaker is handed a microphone and gets on a stage and makes this argument, it's damaging that entire crowd or that entire student body or whatever it might be. And that's a problem for us in our profession. So I mentioned before that this doesn't mean it's a philosophy that's aligned with atheism. As a matter of fact, it's not a philosophy aligned with any religious belief. It's independent of that in that sense. What chiropractic does is it offers a board, or when the definition of chiropractic, when they talk about things natural, when they say it's a science, philosophy, and art of things natural, the reason the words things natural were put into that definition was to offer a border from religion, is to separate us from miracles, is to separate us from the supernatural in that sense of that the views of religion. And it's not that we were condemning religion in any way in our philosophy. That's absolutely not true. But what it does do is it offers a border to say we will go this far in our philosophy. And if you go beyond that, we can make the argument that universal intelligence may be a characteristic of a deity, but we don't get into that. That's not an argument for a chiropractor to make within our own circles of discussion. That may align with your religious beliefs, and that's perfectly fine for you. But we yield at that border of universal intelligence and the source of universal intelligence. So we don't cross that line into that source. So in my philosophy text, around page 60, 61, somewhere around there, this is a quote from there. It says, "There is no concept in chiropractic philosophy that would not find discordance or disagreement with any position from atheism to theism. That entire spectrum of belief has no problem with our philosophy." So religion doesn't enter into it. And people like to make the argument that it does for two reasons. Either they're trying to make our philosophy sound like it's not a solid healthcare philosophy because it's religion, which is wrong. Obviously, we've just discussed that. Or they have very strong religious beliefs and they want everything that they do to fit underneath those beliefs. So they try to bring chiropractic into that religious view they have. And it's improper because it damages their own religious beliefs by saying that there's no solicitude. If universal intelligence is God and God doesn't have any solicitude for you, it doesn't care for you, your level of morality, the way you express yourself to other people makes no difference. That's not a religion. That's a terrible religion. So you're really confusing both very badly if you go down that road. So some people, as I said, like to support their religious beliefs, and either way, it's based upon a fallacy. So another thing we hear a lot about, and more so these days, is innate to innate communication. My innate is caring for your innate, or speaking with whatever it is. Why is that a myth? Well, just because we hear it all the time doesn't make it right. There's a lot of things we hear that are completely wrong. So if we get out that yardstick, that way of measuring, that 33 principles, and start to look at these, there's a couple of them that stand out here. 21 and 23 specifically. 21 is the mission of innate intelligence. And the purpose of innate intelligence, that mission, its job is to maintain the material of the body of a living thing in active organization. And 23 talks about its function, which is a little bit different. It's to adapt those universal forces in the matter that you're made out of, so that all parts of the body have coordinated action for mutual benefit. So what we're saying here is that, my innate intelligence would walk over you to achieve a goal for my body's benefit, because the purpose of my innate intelligence is not to care for you. My innate intelligence is purely to organize and adapt for my own benefit, not for your benefit. Your innate, your innate intelligence is a completely separate issue. So I hope that helps clarify that a little bit, because it is a little bit of a problem. We hear about how, a mother in Brazil may wake up in the night and just feel like something bad has happened, and she'll talk to her son who's in Europe. Maybe he's in Barcelona or something, and he'll call her the next day and tell her that he was in an accident the day that, at that moment the night before. And she'll say, oh, I woke up in the night and I knew something was, I'm not saying that these phenomena, these things don't happen from time to time, but it's not innate to innate. Call it something else. Call it cosmic consciousness or anything, but not innate to innate, because innate intelligence has a very specific role in our body. And the innate intelligence of your body should not and does not care anything for me. That's not how this works. We have very specific terminology, and the meanings are very specific as well. And we have to be so careful, especially when we're really trying to get a grasp on our philosophy, to really, really make an effort to use the right terminology, because it just confuses the issue. Another thing we hear is that philosophy and science and art are separate. We hear about this three-legged stool. We hear that all the time. It's kind of nonsense, because it's not separate. There's no three legs. It's nothing like that. It's not a 33%, 33%, 33% relationship where you have this thing divided in thirds and it's a third of each. That's just silly. When you think about what philosophy plays a role as far as for science. So if we think about research, let's use that as an example. So what philosophy does is, D.D. Palmer said in his 1910 text that he desired to know why two people working in the same shop, working at the same bench, eating at the same table, breathing the same air, one becomes sick and his partner, similarly situated, escapes. Why? Why does that person not go down that same bad path the other person did? Why are they staying healthy? What is it about that? And the important point that Didi is making here is, his question isn't about the sick person. His question is about the healthy person. Why is that person healthy? And that's a really important point to make, because as it turns out, we're going to talk a little bit about how health is the entity. Disease isn't an entity. Sickness isn't a thing. You lose health. You don't get sick. It's not the same thing. We'll get into that a little bit later, so I don't want to get too far down that road. So that philosophy of Didi's, why? What's the difference in these two individuals? Well, that's a question for science. What science should do is to take that question and say, well, we can design a study to look at these two groups of people and try to determine what the differences are between them. That's something that science would do. Now, had they done this, we would have immune research in our profession all over the place. We would have so much neuroimmune research of how the nerve system and the immune system, of course, it's one thing, the neuroimmune system, but how that functions and what it means to have proper coordination in that system, and what it means to have that healthy coordination slip away, and how it makes you vulnerable to a vector, or to a to a bacteria, or to a virus, or whatever it might be. It makes you susceptible to those things. So we don't have that, though. We have some immune research, of course, But think about what the WFC sent us this spring. They sent out letters saying to the profession, saying that there's not enough science to support any discussion about how chiropractic has a connection with the neuroimmune system. Well, that's absurd. Anyone who practices any given period of time knows that. The patients that come in to see you, they know that. You don't have to tell them that. They know that because they realize that they don't have the problems they used to have. They don't get the those health issues they used to have as often as they had before they started coming to see you. No one has to explain it to them. They're smart people. But what that letter from the WFC was, it's a confession. They're confessing to you that they haven't done their job for the last 30 or 40 years. They took your money, but they didn't do their job. Dee asked this question 110 years ago, and what do we have? We have 110 wasted years, and the last 30 or 40, the WFC has insisted that they're the scientists, and you, the students, and you, doctors in the field, that are seeing patients, you stay out of this and let us do it. And then they send you a letter and say, you can't talk about this because we haven't been, they haven't been doing their job. The WFC hasn't been doing their job. It's terrible. It's a horrible thing that they've blown this opportunity. Fortunately, there is immune research about chiropractic, and we may touch on that just a little bit towards the end here. But again, when you think of what the role of science is to take that question, let me back up, to take that question of Didi's and turn it into a study and provide data. So they'll do a study and they'll say, okay, here's the data, here's the numerical data. And then it's applied. And the way we apply chiropractic is, of course, through what we term as art. And there's different ways of looking at art. There's practical art where there's nothing visible. It's like dance, or it's like, performance theater, going to see Shakespeare. That's there's nothing tangible. There's no measurable product at the end of that. The other is what he termed productive art. And those are tangible things that come out of it. Now, what is an adjustment? Is it more like a painting or a statue, or is it more like the dancing type of art, the thing that you can't quite measure? I would argue that it's a little bit of both. I think there's a little bit of everything in what you do as a chiropractor. You have to have measurable, tangible things, and the direction you put a force into a specific spot in the vertebra to bring about the change that you're hoping is going to happen with the position of that vertebra. You can't just hit somebody in the back with a board and think that that's going to be the same thing. So there's obviously a productive type of view to that, but there's also some results that are more of that practical view where there's results we can't measure. There are things that it's not an A plus B equals C when you're dealing with living things, because they adapt. And the way we adapt, that's that practical side that is like performance theater. Everyone's a little bit different, and it's really unpredictable exactly how that's going to turn out. So why do we do the adjustic thrust? Why is it done? Well, it's pretty obvious why we give that adjustment to a subluxation, to a vertebral subluxation. Is it guided by science? Of course it is. You think of what we do. We do an analysis. We draw lines on spinographs, or the X-rays. You take the spinographs. We draw lines on those to determine relationships. We do maybe you might do skin temperature on both sides of the spine to look for a temperature pattern, or a increased temperature along the spine. Even when you look at the table that the adjusting table you use, it's designed specifically, a lot of them, for a very specific technique, and it's adjustable in a way that fits that person individually, so that you can give them the most specific adjustment you can. So we use science in the philosophy and science, and even the design of our tables. And when you do a post check, when you adjust someone to make sure that you've done the job you need to do, that's how we turn science into art. So now this is a quote from Aristotle. He said the art and sciences are powers, but every power exists only for the sake of action. So when you think of that, what is the action that philosophy has? Where does it gain grip? It gains grip through the art you use, through the adjustments you give, through the analysis you do to determine where is that subluxation? What is the characteristic of that subluxation? So you know exactly where you need to be and exactly the direction you need to put a force into the spine to correct, to bring about correction of that subluxation and adjustment of that subluxation. But the thing that arts and sciences have most in common is they're both dependent upon philosophy to provide an impetus of action. You can say that philosophy is the origin of science as well as art in our profession. Not only that, but it's the beginning and the end. So it represents the alpha and the omega of both of them. And since philosophy represents the beginning and end of both science and art, then you can say that, as Stevenson's textbook says, that philosophy encompasses science and art. So it's not a three-legged stool. You can think of it like a cone of philosophy, and underneath this cone, within this cone, are science and art. So you can't truly understand our philosophy unless you have an understanding of the science and art that accompany it and go with it. Because when we subvert that, we start to have problems. And what we end up with are people in the field that aren't really qualified to be doing what you do. And the reason you're on this, Congress they're having this weekend is because you want to be the best chiropractor you can be. Now, you've told some of your friends, hey, you need to get on this thing with us because there's something really important you're going to be able to apply to be a better chiropractor. And some people just aren't interested in that. And that's a sad thing. And that's where we are today. But, I'm personally proud of everyone to take time out of their day to come and listen to what we have to say. You've got some great speakers coming up, some great ones you've heard from already. And I really look forward to you really taking what you learned from all of this and turning it into being a better chiropractor, because in the end, that's what it's all about. So where does our philosophy originate from? Well, we connect causes to effects. In our 33 principles, we talk about there is no cause without an effect. There is no effect without a cause. There's that interconnectedness. There's no accidents. There's no miracles in chiropractic. When you give an adjustment, when Harvey Lillard got his hearing back, it wasn't a miracle. It was a scientifically plausible, rational occurrence. There's nothing of that sense about it. It wasn't a miracle. It's a law of cause and effect. The subluxation in his case was directly related to the effect of him losing his hearing. So to remove that cause is to change the effect. And it's just that relationship. So we talked a little bit about contemplation of self, where our philosophy comes from. And we like to put everything that we see in our practices and in the experience we have with patients, we like to bring it under one unified theory. And that would be our chiropractic philosophy. So, that desire to bring all those things together is what brought our philosophy together. So we get from, things we see in the individuals, and you start to apply those and see some laws in place to help derive that singular view through our philosophy. Now, we talked about philosophy asks questions, science provides data. Also, that philosophy takes that data and brings it into art. Your philosophy determines how you're going to use that information from science and how you're going to apply it in your practice through what you do as a chiropractor. It's not really happening because science, in our profession, science asks their own questions. They take the data and then they tell us what it means. The reality is the WFC statement about immune function and them not feeling there's enough research is not only a confession that they're not doing the research they promised us they would do. They're not doing anything. They haven't done a single study. They're getting all this money for God knows what, but they haven't done anything to answer this simple question. So who is posing the questions? They are. That's our problem right now. They're taking the place of philosophy. And when you lose your compass, you'll never arrive. And the philosophy provides that compass, that way of getting to where we need to be. They have very confused views. These things just aren't correct. And universal intelligence, as we discussed, isn't God. Innate intelligence isn't the soul. The mental impulse. Now, I want to hit on that just a little bit. The mental impulse, the fourth component of the subluxation talked about in Stevenson's textbook and before Stevenson's textbook, actually, up through now, it's a completely viable and it's a completely scientifically sound definition to use today. We hear people say how we need operational definitions and we need this definition and that. We do not. I deal with researchers all over the world that aren't chiropractors, and I explain the four components to them. And they universally tell me, well, of course that can be researched. So when I hear researchers in our profession say that, they can't use that definition, it's a cop-out. Either they don't understand it well enough, which may very well be the case, or they don't want to understand it, which is even sadder. The fourth component, the mental impulse, the reason we use that term is because science isn't there yet. What I mean by that is, science talks about the nerve impulse. And in 1927, when Stevenson's textbook was written, he discussed this point by saying that we're going to use the term nerve impulse, mental impulse, because we know the nerve impulse isn't the full picture of the communication happening through the nerve system. From innate intelligence to the tissue cells of the body. That's not the full picture. We know there's more to it. So when science gets there, whatever term is the right term at that time, we'll use that term. But until then, we're going to use this abstract concept of a mental impulse to say that there's something more than a nerve impulse from what we understand in 1927. There's more than, membrane polarization, depolarization. There's more than vesicle formation at the terminal bulbs of the nerve fiber to cross the synapse to the next nerve fiber. We know there's more than that. We know that every way that they can measure it, even today, 110 years, after Dia wrote his book, 125 years after our profession was founded, science still hasn't arrived there yet. They're getting closer. They're doing better, but we're still not there. They still don't know what the proper relationship is. So, yeah, well, vertebral subluxation's not real. That's just ridiculous. I mean, I have these conversations with researchers all over the world, and they completely understand what we're talking about when it's explained to them properly. And I use our philosophy to explain it to them. I don't explain it any differently than the simple way I wrote it in the book. There's no difference. The simple way Stevenson wrote it. So that modern scientific method, what we have to do is we take two groups of people. Let's just use two people. If we take two people, we have to remove all the differences between them, those variables. So let's use identical twins. So if we use identical twins, how many variables can they have? Well, it turns out they have a lot of variables. So many variables between identical twins that studies have shown even identical twins aren't close enough to use in two different groups. So when we see the scientific method using humans and living things, because they all adapt at a different level and they adapt in a different way, you really can't make the comparisons that they like to make. Like it's not black and white. There's a lot of gray in research in that sense. It does work, however, if you're dealing with, if you have a bar of, a centimeter thick and 4 centimeters wide and maybe 25 centimeters long of a certain alloy of aluminum, and you leave one at room temperature and you heat the other one to 300 degrees centigrade. And if you take and put a torsion, you grab the ends of that with a machine and you put a torsion into it until it snaps. If the one that's heated doesn't snap as soon, you would assume that as the one that's not heated, you would assume that, well, the difference is because that one was heated. So you can say heating this alloy of aluminum causes it to be able to be bent to this much more of a degree before it breaks. That makes sense. You can't do that with living things because you can't take out the variables between two subjects. It's impossible. So on its face, the scientific method fails. I'm not saying we shouldn't be doing research of randomized controlled trials and all that. I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is they don't mean as much as they like to pretend they mean. Medicine is catching on to this. Chiropractic is, of course, going to be far behind them, moving away from it, which medical science has already begun to do. So we talked a little bit about what that means. And this has become the gold standard for science, to the scientific method from the 1860s, and when Mills and a company came up with these ideas. We're finding a lot of fault, a lot of anomalies. And when there's a lot of anomalies that show up that say, well, this doesn't agree with what you're finding, and pretty soon there's a whole bunch of them that don't agree with the theory, well, that means you have to change your theory. But what happens more often is scientists just won't publish that data. If they find something disagrees with what they want to be true, they won't publish it. They'll just pretend they didn't do that study and move on, which is a shame because that really puts a cramp in our ability to understand. So think about what the people in science teach us in our schools and seminars. We learned there's 12 pericranial nerves. We learned that the vagus nerve until 1998, the vagus nerve was thought to be only afferent, only from the brain outwards. There was no sensory side of the vagus nerve. And in 1998, it was discovered in Arizona by A.D. Bud Craig and his researchers that the vagus nerve is not only also efferent and afferent, that's a two-way street, but it's predominantly sensory. So all of the internal organs of your abdomen and your chest and, furthermore than, other things like that, they get their information drawn up to the brain. So innate intelligence knows what's going on. It's drawn up through the vagus nerve from those light touch, deep touch, chemical sensors in your stomach that measure acid levels, and all of these things are drawn up through the vagus nerve so that proper decisions and weightings can be given to that information to determine what must be done now. So there's no, now we know it's not all efferent, outgoing, exiting. Now we know it's also coming in that afferent side in a big way. And I talked before about neural communication, how one nerve speaks to I shouldn't say speaks, but communicates the message, promulgates it along the nerves. So now we know we've known since the 1920. So that's 100 years this year that we've known there are 13 pairs of cranial nerves. Cranial nerve 0, it would be called, is the terminal nerve. They don't know a lot about it. It's around the blowholes in whales. If you cut it in an immature mouse, it never matures, but they don't know anything about it much beyond that. They think it may have something to do with pheromones, but they don't teach us about it because we've always taught it that way. So why should we change it? And the problem is science changes because their understanding of things change. So we know now that there's, much more of this neural communication. As a matter of fact, when you look at what physicists, physiologists, psychologists, people in so many educated fields of research have said, and this is a direct quote, the synaptic delay in each of those synapses is at least 1/2 millisecond, and therefore the parallel and serial interactions between millions of neurons would take a very long time. Now, what they're saying here is that it says here, therefore there must be some other mechanism governing the interactions of large numbers of neurons located even in remote parts of the brain. So what they're saying is a 1/2 millisecond delay between every pair of nerves that along that communication path. And some nerves, wind up and things. There's 20,000 connections thought to be taking place in a single nerve in some instances. So if there's a 1/2 millisecond delay every time there's a communication handoff from nerve to nerve in that sense of what they're talking about here. They're saying that the brain doesn't work. Mathematically, the brain can't work. There's too many delays going on between all these levels of communication. But we know the brain does work. So what they're saying is there must be some other way that this communication is happening. And every year there's another little view that pops up. And, you know, some of them stay, some of them leave, but they're working on it. But right now we don't really know. So we're going to stick with mental impulse just because it's a little more accurate. And the purpose of a mental impulse is to adapt that tissue cell for this moment in time. So for right now, what does this tissue cell need to do? That information is the mental impulse to make it adapt better, to be a better tissue cell for the rest of the body. So philosophy encompasses our science and art. Our science has kind of been hijacked. You know, when you think of, you know, the idea of our philosophy, we're saying that, you know, a living person, you know, that patient in front of you is self-healing. You don't do that. The nerve system is that conduit, that trunk of that the information is carried through for coordinative function throughout the body. And the subluxation interferes with that coordination in the body. That's pretty much the big picture of what we do as chiropractors. And that specific adjustment, that's our input to the system. And it makes us unique. Think of it from another perspective. Dr. Barge often talked about one cause, one cure. Fred Barge, he was a great man. He passed away in 2003. And he wrote a book called One Cause, One Cure that got him a lot of negative feelings from the chiropractic side of the profession that really enjoyed our philosophy, as well as the people on the other side of the fence that want us to all be more medical, because people don't understand what one cause, one cure is. So we need to hit this just a little bit. Not only what it does mean, but what it doesn't mean. That's just as important. So if we, here's the American Chiropractic Association, which is a very medical group. You know, they talk about, you know, how we, you know, that the present day chiropractic does not hold that subluxation is the only cause of disease. Well, that's not a chiropractic philosophy position anyway, because we're not saying that subluxation is the cause of disease in the first place. Okay. This was the president of National College of Chiropractic, which is a fairly medical view school in the Chicago area, where I'm located in the Chicago area. And he says here that they've done away with, for the most part, the one cause, one cure. There's a small element of chiropractic that still adheres to it, but it's not a major element. And that's a problem. It's not a major element because he doesn't know what one cause, one cure is. He thinks it's the subluxation is the one cause and the adjustment is the one cure. That's not what BJ talked about. That's not what Dr. Barge talked about. That's not what it means. Well, what does it mean? This is from the head of research at Sherman College at the time he wrote this. He's no longer there, but he was there at the time. And he said that, you know, the idea of one cause, one cure is, you know, dogmatic adherence to an extreme alternative view of healthcare. You know, that this concept of one cause, one cure, you know, and it's sad that no matter if it's a school on one end of the spectrum or the other, they don't understand what one cause, one cure is, and they're misrepresenting it because it makes them look foolish. So this is from D.D. Palmer. He talked about disease being a lack of coordination between innate, the source of power, and its expression in the tissue cell. So between the origin of the communication and what's happening in the tissue cell, there's a breakdown of some sort. That doesn't mean it's always going to be a subluxation. That's not what he's saying here. Dr. Barge talked about health and how it has to be working consistent with the needs of itself and its environment. What that means when he says itself and its environment, it means its internal environment of your body and the external environment around you. So when your body is adapting to what's going on inside your body and around your body, that is a state of health to the best of its ability, optimally. So the one cause is the body's inability to comprehend its internal or its external environment. The environment of the body is in, whether it's inside or out. So when you're not adapting properly, that's going to be the cause, because your body has to adapt to that, comprehend, it has to understand what's going on and then be able to adapt to it. That's the one cause. So when the body's unable to comprehend itself or its environment because something is interfering with it, its understanding or its action to cause that tissue cell to do what it needs to do, if there's something interfering with that, that's the one cause. And we're not necessarily talking about a subluxation here. It's a self-comprehension issue in some ways. When you don't understand, when your body's unable to comprehend its own internal environment, that's self-comprehension. Well, what does that mean? Well, that's everything from multiple sclerosis to rheumatoid arthritis to everything that's an autoimmune issue. That's what autoimmune is. Your body's not identifying. It's not saying this is me. If your body says this is me, it's not going to attack it. So it's an identification issue that's going on in those types of medically diagnosed issues. So if we look at the principles 30 and 31, you can see by looking at those that what our job is to address a specific type of incoordination that we call dis-ease, with the hyphen, that little dash in there. That's uniquely caused by a subluxation. So if there's an incoordination due to a subluxation, that's dis-ease, nothing else. That's what it is. That's the term we use so we can have an intelligent conversation. Now, the one cure, if we know what the one cause is, the body's inability to relate to its internal or external environment, the one cure is the body's ability to heal itself. That's simple. That's it. That's not the subluxation. That's not the adjustment. When you give an adjustment to a patient, what does that do? Does that heal them? No, of course not. It removes an interference. That's the purpose of this. So if you think of it in that same idea, an input that people put into the body, no matter what kind of doctor they are, the best thing they can do is remove an obstruction to healing from their point of view. Think of it this way. For a chiropractor, that's the vertebral adjustment, that adjustic thrust that we put into a segment of the spine. A medical doctor, an allopath, they change the body chemistry with drugs. A surgeon changes the anatomy. It alters the anatomy through surgery. A psychologist uses suggestive therapy. It's the same concept that they're trying to remove an interference to the body's ability to relate to its internal and external environment. We view it differently because we each have different inputs. If there's a subluxation, we need to clear that subluxation. If there's a body chemistry issue that the MD, the medical doctor, feels they can change by giving someone a drug, that's what they do. And a surgeon says, well, we need to change the way this anatomy is functioning through surgery. So does that make sense? I hope. That's the one cause, one cure. So let's not confuse that anymore. The body's inability to relate to its internal or external environment, that's the one cause. The body's ability to heal itself is the one cure. It's not the subluxation. It's not the adjustment. So when we hear people on a stage say those things, don't be afraid to politely help straighten that out for them, because you're going to have a whole room full of people that get confused if they misinterpret this. So the only reason people would oppose this idea of one cause, one cure, because it encompasses every form of healing healthcare out there, is that they're either don't understand the facts, they're ignorant of the facts, and they just make guesses to think what fills those holes in their understanding, or they're compelled to oppose it because they don't want chiropractic philosophy to gain a foothold in our profession and improve our profession, because it provides a compass for chiropractors. And if you give chiropractors a really good compass of our philosophy, that's going to take them to the heights. It's going to take them in the best direction they can go, but it's not going to take us in a medical direction. That's what medical people are for. I am definitely not against what medical doctors do. It's not what I do. What I do is my business. What they do is their business. I have enough to worry about my own profession. So let me see here. Here we go. Okay. This is kind of an interesting quote from Hippocrates. It was translated back in the 20s. One or more vertebrae of the spine may or may not go out of place very much. They might give way very little, and if they do, they are very likely to produce serious complications and even death if not properly adjusted. Hippocrates, the father of medicine. Now, does that sound like medicine to you? Another argument we hear is that philosophy is your weakness. You know, if you just give up your philosophy, we'd accept you. If you'd pluck your eyes out of your head, we'd accept you in the valley of the blind. And that's where we are today. They want us to walk away from our philosophy because they tell us it's a weakness. And people who promote our philosophy, like myself, we're sanctimonious, philosophical, dogma-spouting dinosaurs. And they call it science versus dogmatism, quackery versus accountability. And the whole idea of dogma is holding a belief in the face of things that say your belief may not be true. I'll be honest with you, they're the ones that are doing that, not us. I mean, our philosophy is as rock solid today as it ever has been. Science is finding a lot of agreement with our philosophy. That doesn't make our philosophy right today. What makes our philosophy right is the fact that our philosophy is right. Whether whether science agrees with it right now doesn't make it more right. It was right already. Science just figured out that it was right. So anyway, your philosophy is your weakness. Think about what they're doing. When you attack an opponent, the smartest thing you can do is attack their strength. What is the strength of the chiropractic side of the profession? Well, our strength is our philosophy. So you make the philosophy sound like their biggest weakness. So then what we have to do is defend our philosophy all the time. We're dancing, trying to defend our philosophy. And when you keep defending a point, people start to think, maybe this philosophy these people have isn't that great, because look at the way they're trying to defend it all the time. And it makes it look like a weakness. And that's how these opponents win these things, because if you're left to defend your strength, you have nothing left. And there's not enough understanding of our philosophy in our profession. We have to dig deeper. We have to go further. We have to continue to work on this. So they take away your philosophy, and now you have nothing. You have no strength, no nothing. And no one likes to have nothing to understand or to follow. So they drag us towards medicine, and we more willingly go. And that's a problem we're facing today. Abraham Lincoln, one of our presidents in the 1860s, he said, "Know your feet are on solid ground and stand firm." What did he mean by that? Well, he's saying that, know that what you believe to be true is accurate. And once you know that it's accurate, stand firm, because it provides for you a great foundation to stand upon in the coming times. So what do they think their strength is? Well, they think their strength is science. Well, I have to tell you, look what the WFC has said about what they've done with our science. In 40 years, they've done nothing. They've done nothing. A fifth lumbar study. Everyone here listening has heard of a study that involves the fifth lumbar. Can anyone name a study that involved the fourth lumbar? No. How about the third? How about the second lumbar? How about anything? They are obsessed with the fifth lumbar vertebra. So if we can't talk about the immune system, can we adjust a fourth lumbar? Because they don't have a single study about the fourth lumbar. They have made a shambles of our science. They've made a joke out of our science. They've destroyed it. And it's not just the WFC, but they're a major player, because they're the ones that keep telling us we need to stay out of it and let them do it. Just give us money, give us money, give us money. And then they get all the money that they ever need, and they don't do anything productive with it. I'm sure there's some good people involved, but the model they're following is not going to get them where they need to be. So they're not scientists. I would really refer to them as alchemists at best, because they've predetermined what the answers are going to be, and they just keep doing studies about low back pain. we just can't continue to go down that path. Now, what I'm going to talk about now isn't really a myth. I'm stepping away from that a little bit because I want to talk to you about something very important in the science community right now. There are different ways that your body can function. Your body, all of the physiology of your body is dependent upon coordination. The control and the coordination of all the physiology is what makes you healthy. So if you think of it this way, running your car, which we'll use the car as an analogy or a similarity to your body. So running your body, you can have three types of drivers running your body. You can have the chauffeur, you can have a club on the left, this thing that locks on your steering wheel so you can't turn it. The wheel just goes straight. That's all it can do. Or you have a chimpanzee behind the wheel of a car. Now, if you're just looking at the wheels and the steering wheel, well, that chimpanzee is going to be all over the place. He's pulling to the right, pulling to the left, pulling to the right, pulling to the left. He's all over the place. Is he going to arrive where he needs to arrive? Is it going to be the healthiest state for that car? Is that car going to last the longest? Is it going to remain a healthy car with that kind of control behind the wheel? Well, of course not, because it's very random. What's happening with that car, the direction it's going, it's very random. There's not a lot of order to it. There's not a lot of coordination in that sense. On the other end of the spectrum, we have the lock on the steering wheel, that club, and you can't turn the steering wheel. So it just goes straight. It's going to get you where you need to go in the straightest route, but that's not how it has to happen. There are curves, there are turns, there are stoplights. There's all kinds of things going on that you need to do. And the best way to get to your destination in a healthy fashion is the one in the middle, what's called complex variability. And what that means, a chauffeur, someone who's a paid driver, who's very good at their job, they know the best route. They're going to drive the speed limit. They're going to drive in a very safe way. They're not going to take chances. They're going to plan the route. They're going to follow a map. They're going to follow the rules of coordination in that sense to get you. They're not going to drive on the wrong side of the road. They're going to get you there in the healthiest fashion. So between the randomness that's going on to the right of the screen with that chimpanzee and no change, that rigid periodicity, what that means is that, like, if this is a heartbeat, let's think of this like a string of heartbeats. And when you have that QRST, that R peak in a heartbeat where it pops up in, high, if we measure from one R peak to the next R peak to the next R peak to the next R peak, and we measure that spacing in milliseconds, we want to see some variability because your body's always adapting. So it should be changing. It should be altering. It should be shifting a little bit. And your heart is part of that. So that function of your heart shouldn't be static. It shouldn't be like that club steering wheel where if your heart rate is 60 and every heartbeat is exactly 1 second apart, that's pathological. That's an extremely unhealthy state for someone to be in. On the other end, if you have an arrhythmia where, instead of having atrial contraction and then ventricular filling and then ventricular contraction and, goes through this nice smooth system, it has atrial contraction, then another atrial contraction, then a part of a ventricular, and then another atrial. And it's just, that's the chimpanzee, that arrhythmia, that, in that sense. So yeah, there's a lot of differences between the pairs of heartbeats, but it's not coordinated. It's a mess. It's chaotic. In the middle is where we want to be in this sense. We want to be where there's some variability going on, that they're not exactly the same spacing, because an intelligent force in your body is saying, for this moment, it needs to change. For this moment, it needs to change. For now, this moment, it needs to change. And it's done in a healthy state. The problem is it's very hard. If you're in the trunk of the car, how do you know if you're in the trunk of this car and you can't see, like this young man is in the back seats, he can see it's a chimpanzee. But if he was in the trunk, in the back of the car, in the boot or in the trunk or whatever you want to call it, and he can't see, how does he know if the chimpanzee is driving or if the chauffeur is driving, and the chauffeur is driving through this course of these road cones back and forth, going through them in a very complex way. Well, you don't know. So when people talk about heart rate variability on its own means nothing, because the problem is if it's static, there's no variability. So if you want to see variability, that's true. You do want to see variability, but how much? Well, there isn't a number, because the way it works is it's about the control. And now, until this year, we couldn't determine that. But what we have now are 3 brand new mathematical algorithms. I hired some data scientists. The lead data scientist is in Denmark at a university. He's a mathematical he has a PhD in mathematical physics, and he took these algorithms I gave him and he turned them into computer coding, and they're going to be opened on a website this year for anyone to use for free, because it's really going to help the research community determine if the body is in a healthier state. So if we give an adjustment, is it becoming more chaotic like the chimpanzee, or is it becoming more complex like that chauffeur? Well, we don't know without this math. So here is an example of how we separate these. And these algorithms, these mathematical formulas, they can look at that series of heartbeats and they can separate them. The ones where the monkey is up there, those are arrhythmia. And the ones below where the chauffeur is, those are healthy. And if you look to the margin, the left margin, and the numbers go up 1/10. Each of those lines is 1/10. 0.1, it goes up. So the difference between them is 0.1, maybe a little more than that, a little less than that, but they're in that range. So let's take a look at what that means if we apply this to chiropractic. Now, this is kind of exciting, and this is brand new stuff. There's nowhere you can see this information. I'm the only one that has access to this information right now. So what we did is we looked at before and after an adjustment. So this patient was the first one that was ever done. We wanted to see what a change would be after a side posture toggle recoil, the way BJ used from 1935 until 1961 when he passed away. This is a C2 listing, second cervical vertebra listing, entire segment right. It doesn't really matter what the listing is for this patient. That's what they needed. We took 270 beats of heart rate beats, and we ran them through these new formulas. And what we found, and see, what's important to understand about this is these formulas don't talk about whether the heart function is more coordinated. They talk, what they mean, and what's so unique about them is they have to do with every single thing in your body functioning at a different level. Is it functioning at a higher level of coordination, which is healthier, or is it functioning at a less healthy level? And these formulas will say that. And it's not just your heart function. It's every physiological function in your body, everything, the control of your body. That's what we're looking at. So that includes the immune system for the WFC people who are paying any attention here. What we found with these 3 algorithms, there's 3 different ones, is that they were pretty massive increases in change. The graph I showed you before was a distribution entropy graph. And remember how we said that was like 1/10 of a point change between those? What we're looking at is a 31.7% change. There was nothing in those graphs I showed you that's even close to that. I mean, they would have to be almost 3 times the size, the space between those. This is a massive change in the health function, the healthy coordination of this person's entire body, and the neuroimmune system is part of that. So this is really exciting stuff. So if we take this into the idea of what happens with an immune function, we have cells. What they do is they go through the body, and they determine self. We talked about the one cause being the body's inability to relate to its internal environment. So this is part of that. So we have cells of the immune system. What they do is they go around and they say, yep, that's me. Yep, that's me. Yep, that's me. Whoa, what's this? This isn't me. As silly as that sounds, that's kind of how they find a virally infected cell, let's say. So this first little drawing here with the little yellow thing in the cell, that's a cell. I'm not a good artist, but that's a cell. And there's a a virus that's infected this cell. So now that little lightning bolt that says NK, what that is, it's a natural killer cell, and it's a type of immune cell that breaks down that virally infected cell to its components. And then those components are presented to the immune system by dendritic cells. Dendritic cells take those pieces and bring them into the lymphatic system and present it to the immune system. And the immune system then makes, the adaptive side of the immune system then makes memory T cells and things of that nature, so that the next time you have an exposure to this same virus, your body's prepared for it. So it will either give you less of a problem or no problem. You know, when years ago, when people had chicken pox, I don't know if that's a thing in Brazil, but it's a thing in America. It used to be anyway. It's a childhood disease or childhood illness. Everybody got them at some point. And once you had them, you'd never have them again, because it goes through this system. That virally infected cell is identified, it's broken down, it's presented to the immune system, and that memory is created. So the next time you have that exposure, it's taken care of just like that. That's how the system is supposed to work. So what's interesting though is researchers, this is from a paper written by a friend of mine who's he has a PhD in psychology, and he does research in psychoneuroimmunology and cancer and PTSD. Those are his three big areas. But in his psychoneuroimmunology focus, what he had written about in one of his papers was about these natural killer cells. And they're talking about how it helps we talk about that one cause and how it's an intelligent process. Listen to what he's saying here. It enables a flexible physiological coping on the basis of evaluation and appraisal of the stressor of that virus in that cell. There's an evaluation and appraisal. That is an intelligent process. You can't have an evaluation. You can't have an appraisal. That's a thought process. That's an intelligent function. So they're saying the exact same things we are in chiropractic philosophy. One more thing I want to cover is a little bit about this COVID-19 virus. This is just a single case I'm going to show you, so don't draw conclusions. Don't post all over the internet about chiropractic and COVID. That's not the point here. But I want to set your mind at ease that the research could be done. This is something that I do. This is the blue line is impedance cardiography. Impedance cardiography is a really good sympathetic measure for research. It doesn't do you any good in practice whatsoever, but it's a good measure for research. The red line is one beat of a heartbeat, and you can see the R peak there in this, as it goes up to that peak. So this is one beat of a heart we're looking at on the screen. And this is a patient who is medically diagnosed with positive with COVID. So we looked at the before and after, and now the kind of changes we're looking for here. I mean, look at these changes, a 13% increase in that same metric. What this says is this person with COVID, the entire health of their entire system, the coordination of their entire system improved post-adjustment. That's pretty powerful stuff. This is the only data that exists in chiropractic that's public anyway. I have other cases that I haven't run all the data on yet. As you can see, these are pretty extreme numbers, and it's pretty exciting that what we do in our practices may have this kind of effect on someone's complete function. So, what can you do? What do you do with this information? What do you do with this understanding of our philosophy and the understanding of how the immune system works and all these things? I'm going to ask you to get out of your comfort zone, get out of being comfortable, do something uncomfortable. I want you to do 1 hour, just 1 hour a week on chiropractic's future. Now, that doesn't mean that that I want you to go give a lecture to a group to bring more patients into your office. I want you to do those things, but that's not what I'm talking about here. What I'm talking about here is that you roll up your sleeves and do something good for the future of the profession. Do something for the students listening to this today. Make it better for them when they get out. Help get laws passed in your country. Help get the right people involved in the politics of our profession. And that may be you. You may need to step into that place, but an hour a week, that's it. An hour is nothing. Think of the time we waste on Facebook. you could probably give back an hour in a day or maybe 2 days of time you spend on the internet, on social media, playing with Instagram or whatever. If you would just spend 1 hour a week giving back to the profession. We can't just harvest from the fields of our profession. We have to plow back in nutrients to enrich the soil so that the next generation can also reap some greatness from our profession. Also, when you refer students, which I hope you do, refer students, someone referred you, someone took the time to explain chiropractic to you, give that benefit to someone else. You owe the world to do that. When you refer students, stay in touch with them, help them, guide them, teach them these things we talked about today and other things about our philosophy and other things about, the way this all fits together for them in our education. Help them, stay in touch. The other thing is to contact the administrators. And what I mean by this is not just when you have a complaint. All they hear is people complain. Oh, the parking at the school's terrible. The food's lousy. This teacher's no good. We don't like, that's all they hear. Think of things that you agree with them about and tell them that. Drop them a letter and thank them for something once in a while. They're much more willing to listen to you if you don't just complain. Look for some positives. Make some suggestions. Don't be so bold as to think you'd be a better administrator. It's a very hard job. There are some people who are very good at that in our profession, some people who probably aren't so good at that in our profession. All of them would benefit from knowing you better. So make that contact. So who will win in this discussion we've been having about our philosophy? The question really comes down to who wants it more? And the fact that you're taking time, your free time, to listen to me right now and to watch this presentation tells me that you're willing to put the effort forward to win. So I hope this has brought some clarity to a few things about the future of our profession. And I appreciate your time and attention. If there's anything I can do to make your path through chiropractic better, easier, safer, anything like that, please contact me. And I will do whatever I might be able to do, or even put you in contact with people that might be able to better help you with whatever your problem might be. I'm glad to do that. So hunt me down and do stay in touch. And I so appreciate everything that Serene and everyone is doing with this event. And I hope it's the first of many, many more to come. You've got some great speakers coming up ahead, and I want you all to prepare for them. So thank you again. And I'm going to sign off for now. This is Rob Sinnott saying, have a great rest of the day. Thank you.